Hey, good afternoon, Amanda, and welcome to this special LinkedIn Live. I'm just going to jump right into things. And when you and I first talked about this event, your thinking to me was, there's HR issues, there are things the CEO doesn't know, everybody's frustrated about this implementation of AI. I was looking today, and 1/3 of all CapEx, capital expenditures in the United States, are now related to AI for industry. This is a number we haven't seen since the end of the Second World War. This is unprecedented, and yet we're not seeing the expected productivity jumps yet. So what's going on? There are things the CEO doesn't know. Everybody's
So that was my, sorry about that. Yeah, no, completely. It's crazy that this CapEx spend is so significant, and yet at the same time, we're not seeing the adoption. So I think what I'd say about that is it's like the digital, transformation, but on steroids now with AI. It's crazy that we didn't learn the lesson from that. But here we are. And so I think the question now is what can be done? From my perspective, coming from more of a people standpoint, HR, L&D, very frustrated to see, applying the same old solutions to problems that were not solved in a different way before. So I think today we have an opportunity to talk about what we can do better.
Yeah, what we can do better and what we can explore, because as with any new technology, things are changing so fast that saying, what exactly the roadmap's going to look like 3 years, 5 years from now, as you and I were discussing, just isn't practical. And last week, I was giving a talk with the head of one of the large boards that is focused on AI. And they brought up a really good point. And they said, listen, right now we're all talking about Claude. But the reality is, I don't even know in 1 year if we'll be using Claude. Will Claude even exist in 1 year? And so this is moving at super high speed, and people are feeling insecure about it. So the latest research from Gallup and Walmart shows that 40% of young American employees feel anxious about AI, and only 18% of young American employees feel hopeful about AI. So this is young, by the way, their definition was 30 and under. So this is a lot of people. And this is one of the biggest markets in the world. And people are not feeling good about this. They're feeling angry, anxious. They think they're going to lose their job. What do we do?
Well, what we don't do is giving people a ton more courses in companies and the usual training, because that's certainly not going to help it, right? So again, I look at what the people functions in companies are doing. They're being pressured to fix this problem. And well, I see that as a golden opportunity, by the way, if you happen to be a leader in that space. But instead of throwing more courses on it, we need to be a little more creative, I think, about how these technologies are actually going to be learned and adopted. I was at a conference in New York just about 10 days ago, and Ethan Mollick said, well, there was a couple of comments that really caught my attention. And one of them was, nobody knows this. Like, we're making it up as we go along, right? So some of the leaders in the world that know the most about this are admitting that, it's evolving so quickly that there are no true experts. And that really poses a challenge to all of us as we think about upskilling people and getting them to adopt technology in organizations.
So when we talk about getting people to adopt technology, what does success look like, in your opinion?
Well, success, what it does not mean is people completed a course about AI, or it
Right.
does not mean people spent more hours using AI, or they maxed out tokens. You and I had a chat the other day about token maxing, which is just insane, and we might go down that rabbit hole in a bit. But it's more about, how does behavior change? How does performance improve? And ideally, in companies that are subsidizing this in our world is, well, then how do business outcomes improve as well? Those are the metrics that we should be looking at, not something basic like, oh, people are, completing more courses on AI.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the initiatives I've seen so far where technology is concerned have been about efficiency. So, we can
Exactly.
do this 10% faster. We can do this with 30% less people. So much of this has been about efficiency. And if we look at technology in the past, that's not where the big breakthroughs are. The
Hmm.
big breakthroughs are going to be the leaders and the founders and the organizations that understand how to use technology for innovation and to do something different and new. And that would probably involve a lot of ecosystem pieces. So, have you seen any examples of where innovation is taking place? And if you have, what has led to this, or what makes it work?
Okay, so that's a really big question.
It is.
Yes. What I'll say is, again, it's not about bombing people with courses. That's not what it is. But I think
Right.
really it starts with from the top down in organizations being just really real about, we're all in this together. This is moving so fast. It's funny when kids are small, it's fine that they don't know what they don't know and they go to school and they have to learn things, but then all of a sudden adults are expected to know it all. And I think we have to break that culture, and leaders and companies need to lead it, meaning that they need to say, listen, I don't know either. I'm experimenting with this stuff too. I'm trying, I'm failing. Sometimes I'm being successful. So first of all, I think there's a key component around role modeling from leadership. This is really important. I'll get to innovation in a bit, but all these things I think are the foundation if we ever expect to get innovation. Another thing is communities of practice, right? So getting people together and to play with AI, to start trying out use cases, but in a more contextualized way. So it's not just this generic, I see the proliferation of, in some cases, which it's better than no AI, I guess, in companies, people playing around with stuff. And it's like, but yeah, you're building these little pilots for what? That's not helpful for your company. And I know strategy with a capital S is your jam. So I'm sure you have something to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, let's start from, yeah, pilot purgatory is one of the most frequently referenced challenges right now when you talk to leaders about what's going on in their organizations. And then some statistics have come out that show that 95% of those pilots don't go anywhere. Actually, I don't see such a problem with the 95% not going anywhere. What I see the biggest problem with is the 5% are not that creative or are not that breakthrough. And so, yeah, as you alluded to, I talk a lot about strategy. And the question is, where is the business, the organization going? Where do
Yeah.
they want to be? And then how can technology help to unlock that opportunity? Because if we just stick to what can we do with technology, then it's not going to be, we're not maximizing what is possible. And if I look at a simple example, you think about resale in fashion, and people have been talking about resale in fashion for 25 years, and it didn't work at any scale. And a lot of people attempted and lost money. And there
Yeah.
are niche examples, but it just didn't scale. And then came along the group at Vinted. Vinted, which now has a valuation over 8 billion euros, is the largest seller of clothing in France. No one sells more clothing in France than Vinted. And it's a resale channel. But what did Vinted do to become so successful? Well, it wasn't actually Vinted itself, it was the incorporation of InPost, where instead of having to find the place to drop off the package, now you have these little lockers at every gas station and train station and shopping center, etc., and big companies. And so it's these ecosystem plays. And it seems so boring and what I call unsexy to say we need lockers with scanners and trucks. But some of what we need in AI is literally that basic in terms of, if we do not have the foundation in data, if we do not have a data culture, I can build every system state of the art in the cloud that we want, but it's not going to do anything because I don't have any way
Right.
to empower my people. And it's removing these friction points, which I still see as missing. And training does not remove friction points. So, share your thoughts with me on this. I could
And
talk all
I
day.
love you are just like a wealth of examples, and I always learn so much from you, Scott. But sure, I mean, I think the big thing is within companies, it's So some are just in paralysis mode and and in probably legal mode and just telling people not to do anything. The ones that are kind of opening up the possibilities of experimentation are seeing, again, a proliferation of this pilot purgatory that you talked about. But what we need to get to is a focus on the for what, right?
Yeah.
So an alignment with the strategy from above, right? What are the actual business priorities? Where do we think we want to go as a company? And then if we want people to play with AI, they should be building it towards that for the company. Now, having said that, and you want to jump in, go for it. If you,
No,
no,
no, keep going.
you said that it's not just all about what the company wants, it's about what is actually good for the individuals in the organizations. And that is, I think, a huge bit that's being overlooked right now. As you said, when you open, people are, freaked out about AI and they really they're worried, is it going to eat their jobs? And that's a real concern. So also aligning it with how is this good for me? Meaning, can I be better at my job today? Can I ideally keep my job? And the best the best scenario is, can I progress in my career if I use AI and apply it, right? And so I think it's aligning that. What is the business strategy? What are the things we need to focus on? The for what, this Venn diagram intersection between what the company wants and what is good for people, that's going to move the needle significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we go any further, a brief introduction. For those of you that don't know Amanda, this is a really good time to get to do so. Amanda Nolan is a board director, strategic advisor to Fortune 500 on people and tech strategy, as well as working with leading HR tech providers, including Sana, etc., and investors throughout the venture capital private equity ecosystems in Europe, Americas, and around the world. So we're really lucky to have you here today. Thank you, Amanda, for taking time out of your agenda. Greetings from sunny Milan. The weather has been absolutely beautiful today. So for those of you that are in Southern Europe, I appreciate you taking time out of the sun to come in and tackle this important discussion. We do have a few comments coming in already on the chat. And one of them is from Bas Debink, and he's saying, looking forward to this discussion, what CEOs are asked to do by their boards and stakeholders and who they hold accountable for implementing. So I want to start with that observation because, and I work a lot with boards, as do you. I see part of the role of the board as providing some fire cover for managers, and that managers cannot constantly be expected to respond to board demands or investor demands when they also need to be getting on with actually working on the hard part of this, which is building that data culture and getting it into the business. What do you see?
So I think right now boards, at least the ones I sit on and the ones I talk to, they're just starting to grapple with this. I mean, right? And so what is their role moving forward? I hope that there will be some steerage and some guidance for sure. The reality is, I think the CEO and the leadership team really needs to take the reins on this, and it needs to be a bit symbiotic. Boss, actually, who I know, hi Boss, is probably asking. He comes from the people function, so who is responsible at the end of the day. So what I do see is this adoption problem is now being thrown to the HR function, and saying, hey, skill people up. But the conversation that I'm excited to have with you right now, Scott, is it's not just about training or courses. There's something much bigger, and it does need to start with them. So given your experience, and by the way, Scott is my go-to person on strategy. He's the whisperer to lots of boards and leadership teams all over the world. He lives on planes more than me, which is saying a lot. Scott, have you seen any best practice yourself in terms of boards, leadership teams? Like, what would you recommend to both the business leaders and the HR sort of L&D people on this session?
Yeah, I'm going to actually build a comment into this as well that's coming from our live audience. So Frank Kahlberg has noted, building on the really interesting question Amanda mentioned, how can we mutually cultivate a culture where people feel safe to say, I don't know, I'm still learning, can we figure this out? What ideas do you have? And the reason I want to bring that back is there's a lot of insecurity in organizations today. And that insecurity does not lead to us wanting to take risks, wanting to break out and experiment. Rather the opposite. Our natural reaction is, okay, I need to protect my team, my job, my people, my
Right.
customers, and I'm going to do that, as opposed to how do we go out and experiment. So the first thing I would say here before anything else is we need to build that culture of psychological safety, and it needs to be real. It cannot be, and if you go on any of the big platforms right now, Instagram, LinkedIn, they're all making fun of this, where the CEO says, "Hey, we're all in this together, and you're all fired," or
Totally,
etc.
right? And what was the example that you gave to me the other day about, was it the Standard Chartered CEO?
Oh
Tell us
yeah,
that story.
yeah. So Standard Chartered, the CEO was in an investor conference call, and he said, "Well, we're only going to eliminate the low value human capital." and and right, and then this kicked off a big thing, and Alphaville, which is one of my favorite columns of the Financial Times, the editor Robin at Alphaville immediately went out and said, we're selling low value human capital merchandise. So if you go on the Financial Times webpage, you can buy hats and t-shirts that say, I am low value human capital. And I mean, obviously the CEO has now felt so strongly about this that he has posted two rebuttals on LinkedIn saying, well, you didn't
That's not
understand
what I
what I
meant.
meant, etc.
Right.
And hey, I don't want to pick on CEOs because I think it's a very tough role to be in right now.
True.
Everybody's waiting for you to make that one wrong word, or step on that one little landmine, so to speak. And with the virality of social media, that goes around the world at light speed. However, there was a bit of truth to the statement in that what managers are looking at is what functions can I automate and save money on. And if that's someone and it's their job, of course, they get really nervous and worried about this. And so we cannot talk about low value human capital. I don't think about humans as capital, actually. I don't think that we're people, we're not numbers. And as a result, how do we get our humanity back into the business and really say, okay, well, what is it we're going to do, and where does technology unlock this? And that's what I think we're missing, because right now, a lot of times we're saying technology can do this, so let's go and do that, as opposed to what in our business could be an improved experience for
Yep.
all the stakeholders. So that's what, in answer to your question, that's where I would start from. Then the next thing I would say is, look, this is an ongoing process. So we cannot look at this as a project with a start and end date, because we're launching on rethinking the logic of value creation in our organizations. And because of that, we can't set it up as a sprint, or as a implementation. We have to say, look, we need to change our way of thinking, and we also, that implies that we also need to change our incentives and the architecture of our businesses, and the way we interact with customers. So there are many different ways we need to approach this, and every stakeholder has a role, from the person on the front line who will have to implement this, to the board member who's going to have to say, how do we do this responsibly, safely, and ensure there is value creation, as opposed to we're just looking for another metric that we can talk about on the investor conference call.
Right, to become like the new ESG. And even though I'm very committed to all of the important things that are behind ESG, it did become a bit of a greenwashing exercise, or it has over the years. Right? And so we don't want that to be the case with AI, that we just, oh, do something with AI. We have a story to tell, check. Right?
Exactly, and this is something that I want to hit on. So
Mm,
ESG had a lot of good intentions and ended up becoming a political football. Now I'm
exactly.
going to leave the politics and the culture war out of it, but what I am going to talk about is far too many organizations approached ESG as a marketing project,
Mm,
and as a result of that, they invested a lot of money, but they were investing money in communications. And communications alone is not going to change your business. And so, what's the end result? Well, the end result is that ESG programs are getting cut or scaled back because they didn't deliver results. But how could they deliver results, given that we set expectations that were unreasonable? And so, what I would encourage everyone that's on this call today and that's watching this recording to do is consider how technology can unlock those new opportunities
Mhm.
and where the innovation is. And in my experience, you're going to need to go outside of the building to get some of that. So,
Mm.
what are startups doing? What are accelerators doing? What are incubators doing? Uh, what are people that have been thinking about this for 15 years doing? Because there are people who've been working on this for a very long time, and they might have been lost in the hype cycle, but they actually know where the technology is and is not, and
Mm.
what you could do and what you couldn't do. So that's what the get out of the building part of this is super important.
Interesting. So I love to get out of the building because companies are so insular so many times, and there's this culture of competition that I think some people have been talking about in the chat. I want to get to that in a moment. But in addition, you had asked before, and I didn't mean to sort of avoid the question, but how do we get to innovation? And I think one of the key things, it does connect to what you said about psychological safety. Amy Edmondson, give her credit for that term.
Yep.
But leaders got to role model it, and it really has to feel okay that I can try stuff and fall down and fail, and that is celebrated. And there's time for that, right? That's outside of business as usual. And I think it's a structural thing. It's certainly a cultural thing. But if we don't have that even within companies inside where they are being creative and they are experimenting, I mean, they're dead in the water.
Yeah, and a great example of that, let's look at DBS, the bank out of
Yep.
Singapore. And
Yep.
they actually have an award every year for the biggest flop. And they write about it on Medium, and they go into the local
Absolutely.
media with the award winners. And I think that's great because the flops are what are going to lead to those big breakthroughs. The incremental changes are good. I'm not minimizing those, but it's the flop that's going to become the huge hit. And that's where I think this gets really interesting. And people will only do flops, will only risk flops if they have the
The moonshots.
opportunity. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
we need more moonshots because actually the whole point about AI, it's gonna automate the tasks that anybody can do. So that kind of work it's becoming commoditized, and the companies that will win, and I don't even see this as something in the, sci-fi distant future. I think this is very real and near. The companies that do not have moonshots, that do not have this culture of experimentation, I don't think they'll be on the S&P in the near future.
Yeah, that's actually, I was talking with a colleague earlier today about this, and because Google earlier this year sold a 100-year bond. And the colleague of mine said, "Well, I think it's pretty safe. It's Google." I said, "Fair enough. Alphabet has a super impressive track record, and I've met a lot of really smart people that are working there. However, let's go back to 1926 and look at the largest companies of America, and where are they today?" So in 1926, the largest company in America was U.S. Steel.
Yep.
Now, where is U.S. Steel today? And that's, times change and move on, but it's very hard for organizations to stay on top for a century. I
Mm.
do want to bring in some of the comments we have here because we're
Yeah,
getting
there's
a lot of
a
them.
rich conversation over there, so go for it.
So, and I just, while I'm doing that, one remark: the audience we have here today is one of the most diverse audience
Yes.
as I've ever seen. We have people from Sydney, Australia, and people all the way to Los Angeles.
Mhm.
We have people in Africa, in
So some
Europe.
people are not sleeping.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, that the old saying, "What's keeping you up at night?" when it comes to AI is obviously true. So one comment here from Glenn Tion. He's calling in from Panama, and he's saying, asking, "How are you seeing Gen AI accelerating the experimentation loop, going from hypothesis to idea to prototype and to validation of adjustment or hypothesis? And how is this different by horizons? Core growth and explore." Before you answer that also fits in with another comment from, oh, excuse me, I'm going to pronounce this badly, Tejawini Umi, who's talking about the cycle of design thinking and
Mm.
emphasize, define, ideate, prototype, and testing to see where things go. And they're both asking, what are our thoughts on this? So, what are your thoughts?
Wow, that's a big one. I'm still
Yeah.
digesting. How are we seeing Gen I accelerating spirit? Well, I think, the the one just word I would say, and this is a comment, is velocity, right?
Right.
What's crazy with Gen AI is, so I think it's becoming an expert economy where smart people that before maybe didn't have the execution capacity, the technical capacity can just say, oh, I have this idea. And all of a sudden, that loop is just accelerated, right? Where you could spin off, and this is why we have this proliferation of pilots. In a very, very short period of time. So the innovation loop is faster. I think it's about harnessing across the organization, how can we really then translate all of that experimentation and piloting into actionable projects that become, that give results for businesses.
Yeah, and give results for businesses that are taking us again in the direction, or what one of the commenters,
Align with the
Andrew
strategy,
Watson,
of course.
yeah, Andrew Watson is saying when they start with the C-suite and senior leaders and asking, what type of company do you want to be?
Yeah.
And then what barriers do you have to overcome? What's the impact on culture, etc., so that you're moving in that direction and that we're unlocking that potential. Now, moving, I'm thinking. I mean, we have so many ways to take this conversation, but there's something I do want to talk about. And so we've said training is not the answer.
No.
Now, I do want to say, if we are going to provide capability upskilling opportunities, what should they be? Because I don't
Hmm.
think, just offering, here's a catalog of courses
No,
is
no.
the way to go. So what do you recommend? What do we do in terms of building a program that works?
Sure. So passionate about this bit, and I don't want to poo-poo formal learning. Sometimes that is the best way to get where we need to go. But in most cases, it needs to be really in the flow of work. And this has been, a cliche, I guess, for a long time, learning in the flow of work, but it hasn't really been delivered because the technology couldn't do it at scale and pace. The technology now can. It's very exciting. Within companies, there is a way to give employees, just what they need at the right time so they can do their jobs better today and build skills for tomorrow. I'd also say, I mentioned this a little while back in this conversation, communities of practice, like just peer groups of, we're all trying to experiment together. So I don't care if it's a WhatsApp group, a Slack group, a Teams group, or what have you, but creating these spaces where you can say, okay, I'm going to try to apply this thing that's called AI to the job I'm doing to increase productivity, but ideally deliver value, right? Not just if it's not just an efficiency play. So those peer groups, communities of practice, I think that is absolutely fundamental. That would be where I'd place my chips.
Yeah, thank you. And how can we show the, I don't want to say career path, because I don't think that's quite it, but how can we show what skills that people are building today that will help them tomorrow in relevance in
Mm,
their job, etc.? Because I do hear a lot of concerns about that people are saying, am I even going to be relevant in 5 years? And what am I going to do for a job? So much of this anxiety and anger is coming from, will I even have a job to go to? Which I don't think is the right question. Uh, More being, what job do I want to go to? But
mm,
that being said, there are people are making enormous investments in education and learning for skills that machines may, to some degree, replace or reduce the relevance of. And so that's where there's, I think, this anxiety coming from, and where organizations, I believe, could have some direction and give some hope and optimism, because the message about technology needs
yeah.
to be a positive one, not just, do this or you're going to lose your job.
100%. So I think, so one of the things we talked about before was, what is the vision? What company do we want to be when we grow up? And
Yeah.
then that needs to be communicated down. But also from an individual standpoint, what does this mean for me and my career? People need to put food on the table. And so
Yeah.
what skills are going to be marketable in the future?
Yeah.
maybe I'm biased because I'm a liberal arts, I have background, but I really do think those generalist skills of communication and creativity and all really are going to be the thing. But also, I was just someone who said it to me the other day. I can't remember, so I can't credit them. I will do in the comments when we publish this. But about like AI, it's not that scary. When you think about AI, when you think about prompting, first of all, it's just about like asking questions to a human that's going to take everything very literally, and then being
Right.
really good at AI is just being a good manager, really, or being a
Yeah.
good mom.
Yeah. And
How do you guide
understand.
people, AKA agents? Anyways, so when it comes to skills, I think it's these universal skills that it's not the specific technical skills. It's really more about that broader humanist
Right.
lens.
Yes. And okay, so I'm going to put together, there's a lot of comments here. So I'm going to put
Yeah,
together a
yeah, yeah.
few
I'm reading
and
them.
turn them in. So
And I
I
see
agree
friends.
with
Hello.
Maria Pia Bazzolo asks a very basic question. Where do we start? And I think
Mm,
that's a great
great
question.
question. Yes. So don't boil the ocean is the big headline there, which is don't try to completely, especially, I talk to so many very large enterprise organizations, and it's like pivoting, turning the Titanic around before it sinks. And you have to be realistic about what is your culture and what is your maturity level, what are your legacy technologies, et cetera, et cetera. And then you try to pick some, you define your North Star, but then
Yeah.
something that's tangible and doable on the short term. And that might just be a pocket of people in your company that are on board. And that's how you do a test case, right? I don't know, Scott, if you have anything to add.
Yes, this is exactly where I wanted to go with this as well. We don't need to deploy technologies in every division, every department, every country, every business unit
Right.
simultaneously. We can look for those pockets where there are some huge opportunities. So I've seen in a few organizations where R&D is an area where there are some real breakthroughs that are taking place by combining some classic computing and AI technologies with concepts that are coming from quantum algorithms and running those on classic computers and getting some really, really interesting results. That isn't the whole company. That could be 30 people, right? And that 30-person team, there's 3 experts on them that are really driving into this, and the other 27 are supporting them. The other thing I've seen is understanding where the technology is valuable and where it is not. And for example, Heiko Strubing is online, and he's commenting, knowing what Gen AI is useful for is important. Otherwise, experimentation is wasting the effort.
Mm.
So I'm not going to date myself too much, but when I studied computer science, the first thing we always learned was, is the machine more efficient than any other alternative? And
Yep.
often the answer was no. And still today, I mean, an LLM is not necessarily the most useful or efficient alternative. So let's use it where it can do something that's
Right.
special, not just say, oh, we're going to do everything with an LLM because we've installed Copilot.
Yeah. First of all, 2 points. Obviously, AI is not just LLMs. So there are
Right.
neural networks,
Thank
and
you.
the AI thing that's coming is going to just blow our minds, I think. But let's talk about efficiency for a second, because there's this been, talking about adoption. The CapEx is insane. How much money is being thrown at these tools, and then companies aren't getting the ROI. So the first, strategy that we've seen is, oh, we're going to incentivize people to use more and more tokens, right? And literally in companies, they've been giving like badges and medals and things for
Yeah.
tokens. And the cost is crazy. And so even where you see use cases, I was just reading the World Economic Forum study with Accenture, real cases of how this is being adopted in companies. And actually the value gain is quite, not that great. And then you think, well, how much did you actually pay for the tokens? Right? To save you that
Yeah.
100,000 in your cost center, your call center or what have you. So I think we're at a moment where there's going to be a course correct around, it's not just using for the sake of using, but let's be more targeted.
And let's be open to hearing the bad news as well as the good news. And what I mean by that, there's been an organization, it's been a lot in the media in the last week, where the CEO said the HR department is doing nothing but causing problems. So I fired them all and replaced them with OpenClaw. Now you can imagine where this is going to end up, because I don't think it will be very good. And I had to check, is this some kind of parody or urban rumor? No, but it's true. An organization did this. And so, of course, we don't want to hear the blockages or the obstacles every day, but we do have to ensure that what we're doing is responsible and is keeping our people safe, and also respecting our customers, because I see too many also examples now where customers get locked in these LLM loops of hell, and they can't actually talk to anybody. And what do? They churn. They go, and this is B2B. I'm not talking about I went to buy a pen on Amazon or something from Target. I'm talking about big B2B accounts where people say, forget it. Like, this isn't working. I'll find a supplier that respects me. So we're frustrating our customers and our employees. And are we doing it because we don't want to confront the bad news and just stick with the good news?
Well, a lot in there, and I'm also been reading the chat here.
Yeah.
I love, there was a comment here, I'm scrolling about, Christoph is saying, it's a bit of transition. What job do I want to go into, or dismissing job anxiety is a bit of a privileged perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And he's
Mm-hmm.
talking about the optionality. And you know what, Christoph, I think you're totally right. I think we're going to see, we're already seeing it, in fact, a delta of net job destruction for a while. In fact, it's one of the few times in history, if not the first time, I need to check my facts, where the GDP, at least in the US, has gone up, driven by AI, but actually employment has gone down. So,
Yeah.
right? Take a pause to think about what that means. So all of a sudden you have a lot of people that, if they still are lucky enough to have a job and they're in that privileged space, psychological safety, again, bring that back in. People are scared. People are
Yep.
scared. And AI, they're not sure, is it my friend or is it not my friend? So when you think about adoption, I think there's a lot of hurdles. There's a lot of blockers. One is companies are not clear about what is our policy, what is the sandbox, what can you do and not do? There's no role modeling, et cetera, and there's a know-it-all culture. But then also, what does this mean for your role? But the fact of the matter is, I think people that don't use AI to augment the work they already do are going to have a challenge. And so that should be the honest message from leadership, right?
What's interesting too, the Economist and Financial Times and some other organizations have published survey results recently by country on who's excited about AI use and who's not excited about AI use. And interestingly enough, it's the emerging economies that are most excited. So if you look at, the big Nigeria is a good example. So young Nigerians are some of the most excited population in the world about AI. And this
Mhm.
also follows in China, in developing areas of China, for example. And then we look in the West, and of course, the country least excited about AI is Germany.
Yep.
And so you're saying, what's going on here? Because you would think that if I go back to our standard chartered CEO comment, it would be Nigeria that would be hit first by this and not Germany. But yet it seems to be the flip side in terms of people's perspectives. Now, we don't know that's reality because this is perspectives, but it certainly plays a lot into things. So I'm thinking back to, and I saw the comment from Christoph too about optionality and socioeconomic privilege. I agree with what he's citing there, but I wonder how this is actually playing out in reality. And
Mm.
is it going to be that some super smart programmers from Pakistan find a new way to do something that completely upends,
A
you know,
1,000%. And so I think actually, who's to gain? Who are the winners and the losers in this? I
yeah.
think if I'm not a betting person, but if I were, I would say it is the emerging economies. It's people that have not had access to education, that have not have access to privilege. Actually, the fact that now with some, AI model, they can create companies almost from nothing. I think there's a serious possibility that very soon we'll have companies with a leadership team of 1 or 2 or 3 doing the work of 10,000 that will blow some of the old-fashioned companies out of the water, right? So from a equity perspective, it's interesting times. But I think that those of us who are sitting on our laurels and maybe have rested with a lot of privilege and collected really huge salaries, it's the knowledge workers too that really need to get with the program.
Yeah, it is. I'm going to bring up a few comments. One of them I'm just highlighting on the screen. This is from Andrew Watson. AI usage is a vanity metric. That was the sentiment shared by the CEO at Logitech 2 weeks ago. He said Logitech has switched by measuring what AI simplified or reduced in terms of tasks and barriers. And then the other comment I want to highlight here, and I thought this was pretty cool, was from Ana Luisa Romero. And she's talking about testing protein foldings. And
Mm,
this is something that could not be done until AI was able to be used. And so the question could be, what has been impossible to date because
yep.
of limitations of speed, data volumes, and can be now
That's where
done
it
with
gets exciting.
technology? Yeah, I find that really exciting because there are health challenges that we all face. There are longevity challenges that we all face. And technology is all of a sudden opening up all new ways of thinking about this that can improve our lives. So there are some good things to come of this as well. Uh, what about, let's touch on, and this is the $500 million question, the tokens, right?
Oh, yes, and I
So
saw Alfonso, hi, Alfonso. According to Brian Solis, corporate income statements may need a new metric, EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization, and tokens, 100%. It's insane. Like, spending tokens for the sake of spending tokens. It's like, courses or training for the sake of training. For what? It's so stupid. So
yeah,
that. So if anybody, wants a takeaway, please let's not use that as a metric. It's not about more tokens. It's not more hours of using AI. Please, let's just stop.
right. Yeah, and that Nicola Vecchia is noting the same thing. Bloomberg this morning had a report saying that Walmart, Uber, and Amazon are curbing use and putting limits
Well,
on
because they're
tokens.
looking at those invoices coming in. So, again, I think that that's going to course correct itself. But going back to kind of the theme of this and why people might have joined, it's people aren't adopting AI, right? And what are people not telling you? Another thing I want to touch upon is just shadow IT, shadow usage. So the reality is in companies, if you are dragging your heels and really not coming up with, this is the strategy, these are the tools you can use, this is how we want you to use it, and you're reasonable, people are going off piste. They are downloading apps, they're using AI all the time. And
Yeah.
this is really happening. And the security risks, I just can't wait for some big news to break about major breaches of IP. There's already been a couple, but it's going to get bad, I predict.
Oh, there are more. I mean, obviously, people don't want to publish this because it's not good news, but there are more than we can imagine. And the shadow use of AI, and so this phrase shadow AI use implies when you're using AI at work that is not authorized by your employer. The latest survey shows 68% of Americans are using shadow AI in the workplace. Now, the issue is we don't know what they're using. Maybe they're using a really well protected Claude set up in with the data isolated and sandboxed, maybe. Or maybe they've set their open Claude to just go out and do the job. And the issue is then, are we protecting our other employees? Are we protecting our customers? Are we protecting our IP? There was an example about 18 months ago where Samsung, some programmers had uploaded their algorithms into an earlier version of ChatGPT, and that actually led Samsung to say, we think we've lost about 100 million in IP. And this is what they claimed. Of course, we don't know for sure what the real results are, but in any case, it wasn't a positive thing at all.
Yeah, so that was the example that I was trying to fish for in my head. So I think we're going to see more of that. But how do we get people to use this stuff, but in a way that adds value for companies? Let's dumb it down for a second, right? So again, I'm going to insist on communities of practice. And I think I had somebody here in the chat also kind of give me a +1 to that. So giving people clear boundaries about this is, this is how we're doing it here. It's role modeling by leadership is super, super important, but also them failing and sharing, right? So we don't have a know-it-all culture. Then having these, communities of practice that sometimes do need to be facilitated or moderated so they don't die. I think that's key. Also, in that respect, going to where people are already connecting is overlooked. So it's not about creating new places. It's about saying, okay, where are these, I don't know, marketers in our company? Where are they all hanging out already? Going to them and then embedding it in there. So that's where that learning and the flow of work bit becomes interesting. Courses and long form stuff does have a place for sure, but I think that's at the bottom of my list in terms of what I would invest in.
Yeah, I agree with you. Couple of comments. Alan from Dubai. AI governance is the major winner from all this. Yes, I would agree with that. So I'm involved with Boards Impact Forum out of Stockholm and working with boards on how do we tie together innovation and governance at the board level. And certainly AI governance is a big winner. And the most forward thinking organizations are working on this. And this is where I would actually vote a little bit for training because there are many board members that don't have a background in AI or neural networks, and it's hard for them to add value in the conversation if they're not sure what we're actually talking about, and that we're talking to people that we can trust. So many of the advisors that are in this industry are actually selling you platforms or technologies, and I mean they're doing a great job, and I see them adding a lot of value. But sometimes you want the objective viewpoint that says like we're not sure. Let's step back and look at this and debate the pros and the cons rather than just let's jump in with both feet. Um, this is what I'm seeing. So there is a statement here from Scott Body in Virginia. What kind of company do I want to be when I grow up? And clearly communicated from leadership are such important distinctions.
Hmm.
And so, he's saying we can implement a kind of enterprise level ikigai that activates our employees to creatively embrace Gen AI instead of being terrified by it. There's a purpose for our organization's existence. Here's what we want to accomplish. Here's how you can help us. And I think this is a really positive way to frame it in terms of what are we going to do together and why will that be beneficial for everyone. And so I'll come back to something I talked about early on in the conversation. Let's talk about incentives.
Yes, money.
Yeah, money, benefits,
No,
prestige within
money.
the organization. Money. Okay, forget about all the other benefits. Let's talk about money. Um, how does money fit into what's going on with AI and implementation of AI, or not fit in your experience?
Well, I mean, I think there's this crazy race right now. We just have to buy all these tools because we think if we want to survive, we have to have AI, right? So that's where we're at. Now there's this moment of, wow, this is really expensive. People are kind of using it, but the only, thing we've tried to tell them to do is just do more and more and more with no direction,
Right,
right?
right,
And
right.
people really don't understand. So people, meaning employees, their incentive is just to use AI. Go use AI, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And that's going to keep me my job, pretty much.
Yeah, it won't. Sorry.
Well, I think that's really though where we're at. So people are starting to freak out. I got to use AI. So I've been told I need to use AI. So let's play around and waste a lot of money.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think it will help them to keep their jobs. In addition to spending a lot of corporate money, I think I've highlighted the comment from Heiko here. Giving people space to experiment is needed, but this is not that easy for companies
True.
who are trying to do more with less. Okay, so we know, and this is back to Charlie Munger, and I loved his role at Berkshire Hathaway. And he said, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcomes. This was one of
Mhm.
his most famous and most repeated statements. And this is true. And in most organizations today, the incentives are still tied to the previous systems and logic of value creation. And so this will limit how much we can expect managers to embrace and deploy AI because they might be working against their own interests. So then how do we step back and look at, well, you know, how do our compensation and recognition packages work, and how should they work given that our business models are changing and that our environment is changing and that the way we're going to make money is changing. And I see a lot of times those two aren't keeping up with each other. And I think that's one of the biggest barriers to really wide scale adoption. Because, of course, if I'm bonused and rewarded on system A, I'm not going to break it because
Right.
I've probably optimized it.
No, 100%. And so again, I think that communication is key there. And first of all, leadership has to get it straight in their own minds, and then it needs to trickle down so that people are in line with that. I'm looking at a question from Maria Pia Basolo, who you may know. Who owns the implementation, though? Who owns it? Right? Who's responsible for this strategy? I think that's a really, really smart question.
Yeah.
But I have some.
So I'm going to say two things. One, the CEO owns it, and two,
Mhm.
everyone owns it. And the board's role is to ensure that management is responsibly implementing this in ways that drive value creation, and management's job is to do this in a way that is positive. So, and I really like Maria Pia's question here. My thinking on this is uh, companies are moving very fast. Technology is moving very fast, and external events, whether we like it or not, are pushing us faster than has been the case for a long time. So we need to be moving. We can't stand still. We can't wait and see. We can't say, oh, I don't want to adopt technology. It's just not going to happen. So now the CEO has to really be the leader here, and she or he explain to people where we're going, what our strategy is, and how they're going to provide support. Because we can't just say, okay, go do this. How are we going to support people in doing this?
Right, and especially I think there's been some comments in the chat as well about, well, what does my role look like in the future and how are things gonna
Mhm.
change? And until we understand that whole bit, and one thing we even haven't even touched upon is the reality is we're moving very, very fast, even in large organizations, toward a scenario where it's humans and agents working together.
Yeah.
And so how, workflows are gonna be changed dramatically. And so all of this, it needs to be part of the conversation, I think. It's not, okay, adopt AI, but then is the robot going to take my job? But no, it's what are the things I need to learn? How can I augment the things that I do already to work together with AI in this new world?
Yes. Now, even on from that, are we automating things that don't need to be done at all? And in
Uh,
my experience, this is so. I looked at the report that we shared this morning from Harvard Business Review on how people are using AI. The biggest use of agentic AI is for taking notes and transcribing them.
yep.
And when I log
Either
into
that
some
or
meetings,
personal therapy, right?
yeah, yeah, I'm talking
This
about
is one
business
by
use and
Mark
stuff
South
like that.
Sanders, correct?
That's right, exactly. So when I look at that and I see there are some meetings I'll log into where there are more note takers than physical people, and I'm questioning, yes, a machine can do this, and yes, a machine can automate this, but is anyone ever really reading those notes at all? And if they are, do they have to read 5 pages of notes to get to the 3 lines that matter? And this is
Totally.
where I'm getting concerned, is that I think there's a lot of busy work going on in organizations right now.
Yeah.
And this is not helpful at all. That we're creating a bureaucratic bomb that self-perpetuates itself and is just frustrating people, where you have managers sending people PowerPoint slide decks that were created by AI
Yeah,
and
yeah.
employees responding with responses created by AI. Where's the value creation in this?
100%. I just had a conversation yesterday with the CEO of a company that I'm on the board of, and it was another board member keeps spamming them with all of these documents that they've created with Claude or ChatGPT or whatever, that is challenging them on their position on tax. And then there was another thing about something else, and just the volumes it was death by PowerPoint before, and I was excited. I am excited that now hopefully it's leveled the playing field, that anybody can create a slide deck really quickly. But then if you're being bombarded with 20 slide decks or 20 documents that you need to read to make a decision, that's really not helping. Especially
No.
if those documents have not been vetted, because they're just the output of some LLM. So
Yeah.
that is definitely the behavior you don't want to incentivize.
Absolutely. We're almost out of time. I can't believe it. I knew
Oh,
this
wow.
hour would fly by, but we have less than 5 minutes left. Frank Kohlberg brings a big question that I've highlighted here. To what extent should we rethink the
Yep.
word implementation, not as executing a plan, but more as testing hypotheses,
I love that.
trying out ideas, or perhaps an even more accurate learning-oriented concept? What are your experiences and ideas?
So I would say I love that, Frank. The plan is that there is no plan. So I have done some work in Germany, and I struggled for a while because the very structured people, they like a plan. And when you think about how do you encourage a culture of innovation and agility, the whole point is we're going to have to iterate. And so I think that experience is extrapolatable to what we're trying to do here. It's to just tell people we need to try this stuff out. We need to fail in a safe way because these are the guardrails, et cetera, right? And then we get up and we try it again. So implementation isn't that we have this formal destination that we know we're going to need to hit. It's more like we need to just iterate. We need to try, fail, and keep on going.
Yeah, we're on a journey. No one knows exactly where it's going. Experimentation will be key. Experimentation implies there will be errors. So you mentioned, for example, German corporate culture. I've worked with a lot of very talented German organizations, but
Yep.
in general, not to overgeneralize, but in general, do
Oh,
not think about making mistakes. They want to ensure that things are perfect, and so yeah, we can consider this. Um, Amanda, your last thoughts and comments.
my last thoughts and comments. Stop throwing courses and training at this, even
Okay.
though they do have their place. Think about more about getting leaders to role model, to get them comfortable themselves, and then getting them to role model this behavior. I said it 3 times. I'll say it again. I think communities of practice are key. That coaching and mentoring aspect we haven't really gone down that path, but I think that's also valuable. I'm just trying to think of. Oh, and then the other thing, so if there are CEOs, CFOs on this call, C-suite, don't incentivize your people function based on hours of training completed or courses completed. That is not a good metric. And if that is what you're telling them to do, then let's start over, give me a call or Scott, because that really is not helping.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there were some comments early on, and there were a lot we didn't have an opportunity to get to, but said, let's
Yeah,
rethink
so many.
this. Carolyn Freeman, rather than asking employees to step away from work to learn, we need to bring development into the flow of work through
Agreed.
things like coaching, adaptive experiences,
There
skills
you
intelligence, guided check-ins, practice environments. And I would encourage people, again, get out of the building,
go.
go
Mhm.
visit your local accelerator, go visit your local incubator, listen to what people are doing, look at what they're experimenting with, because there are some amazing, talented ideas that are being percolating as we speak. And that's not happening necessarily in big corporate. That's happening in small organizations that one day might be the disruptor for your industry.
I love that. And I think from a strategy perspective, which is your jam, that's really smart. I love Scott here as maybe a closing, that he takes his notes and then puts it into Claude and gets the 3 things that you needed to know. I would love to know what those 3 things are. Maybe I'll learn something myself.
Yeah, that's actually Scott Bodie. You could share that with us. How you do that?
Yeah.
a process. That sounds cool. Well, everyone, thanks a lot for this intensive hour. You can keep the discussion going in the comments. So we will continue to monitor this and where possible answer and respond. So please, this is not the end. It's opening up of a conversation. I hope to see you all soon on a blog, a LinkedIn Live, at a live event. And Amanda, thanks for all your time today. I really appreciate it.
No, likewise, Scott. It's always a pleasure to have the conversation with you.
Cool.
Take
Good
care.
afternoon, everybody.
Ciao.
Bye.